Today we stand not just for Burkina Faso, but for every nation whose voice was silenced for too long.
The heart of this historic speech is not politics, it is humanity. The Prime Minister of Jamaica stands before the world, not to impress or seek applause, but to speak a truth that has been buried under centuries of silence. He admits something rare in global politics, that Jamaica, like many others, benefited from a world system that kept Africa weak. He speaks as a man, not a politician, acknowledging that silence can also be a crime. This moment is about courage, the courage to say we were wrong, the courage to heal wounds with honesty, not with empty promises. His words are not written to win votes or headlines, but to touch hearts and to begin rewriting history. What makes this speech powerful is its humility. The Prime Minister does not speak from a place of superiority, but from one of equality and reflection. He calls this day a day for courage, a day for reflection, a day for an apology that carries substance. He wants the world to know that true leadership is not about pride, but about truth. For too long, Africa's pain was ignored, her strength underestimated, and her history rewritten by others. But today he declares that the era of silence is over. He reminds everyone that justice cannot live in speeches alone, it must live in action. That is why this apology carries not just words but a promise backed by real change and reparative justice. This moment is also a message to the world, especially to nations of the global south. It shows that healing begins when nations dare to face their pasts without fear. Jamaica is not trying to save Burkina Faso. It is trying to stand beside it, as a friend, as a partner, and as a brother. The Prime Minister's voice carries the weight of history and the light of hope. He speaks for every nation that has ever been silenced or shamed, reminding them that dignity and justice are stronger than money or power. His core message is simple yet profound, that it's never too late to do what is right, and when one nation stands up for truth, the world begins to heal. When the Prime Minister of Jamaica announced a $600 million reparative commitment to Burkina Faso, it wasn't just about money, it was about meaning. This pledge is a recognition that no amount of currency can ever truly pay for centuries of exploitation, stolen wealth and silenced voices. But it's a beginning, a real, measurable and honest beginning. He made it clear that this is not foreign aid, not a favor, and not a political move. It is an act of moral accountability. For the first time, Jamaica is saying to Africa, we owe you, and we will not hide behind excuses. This fund is not a gift, it's a form of justice being repaid, a small light in a long history of darkness. What makes this commitment unique is how it will be given. The Prime Minister promises that the $600 million will come with no conditions, no hidden strings, and no foreign interference. It will be used entirely by Burkina Faso, by its government, its people, its youth, as they decide best. This is not a donor-recipient relationship, it's a gesture of respect. The money is to be distributed over 5 years, ensuring long-term growth, not a quick headline. It's a chance to rebuild schools, improve healthcare, boost agriculture, and give young people opportunities that history once denied them. Every dollar, he said, represents a promise to build, to restore, and to empower. Beyond economics, this commitment sends a deep emotional and symbolic message. It tells the world that reparations are not just about the past, they are about the future we choose to build together. By investing in Burkina Faso's development without control, Jamaica is showing how real partnership looks. It's an example to all post-colonial nations that acknowledging wrongs doesn't weaken you, it makes you stronger, wiser, and more human. This is what the Prime Minister called justice, dignity, and humanity in action. Through this $600 million gesture, Jamaica isn't trying to erase its history, it's rewriting it with courage. And in that moment, the world saw not just an apology, but the birth of a new kind of solidarity, one where nations rise together, not one above the other. The purpose of this historic speech goes far beyond politics or economics. Its meaning lies in truth, in healing, and in the courage to face history. The Prime Minister of Jamaica made it clear that this apology was not about guilt or pity, it was about responsibility. For centuries, nations across the world have watched Africa being exploited, manipulated, and controlled through unfair systems that made her look small while others grew rich. Jamaica, he admitted, was also part of that silent crowd, not always by choice, but still complicit through inaction. So this apology is Jamaica's way of breaking that silence. It is a promise that Jamaica will no longer stand by quietly while injustice continues. The purpose, he said, is to start a new chapter, one where truth replaces silence and courage replaces shame. The deeper meaning of this act is unity. The idea that the struggles of Africa and the Caribbean are not separate stories but one shared journey. Both regions were torn by slavery, colonization, and economic domination. Both were told for generations that their destinies must be written by others. But through this apology, the Prime Minister sends a message to the world that these two lands are bound not just by pain but by pride and possibility. This is about standing shoulder to shoulder, not as donor and receiver, but as brothers and sisters who understand each other's wounds. He says, this is not about Jamaica rescuing Burkina Faso, it's about acknowledging our shared truth. The purpose is not to look backward in sorrow, but forward with strength, to turn historical pain into future power. And that is what makes this moment so powerful. Its meaning lives in hope, hope for a world where justice is not just spoken in conferences but practiced in action. The Prime Minister's words remind us that nations can rise not by denying their past but by confronting it. This apology and commitment are the first steps toward rebuilding global respect for Africa, not as a victim but as a leader. Jamaica's voice, joined with Burkina Faso's courage, becomes a symbol of what the global South can achieve when unity replaces division. In this new era, the purpose is clear, not to fix history, but to shape a future built on dignity, equality, and truth. Africa's struggle has never been about weakness, it has always been about resistance. The Prime Minister of Jamaica, in his moving words, reminds the world that Africa was never poor, it was made poor. For centuries, empires and corporations built their wealth by draining Africa's resources and breaking her systems of growth. Her gold, her diamonds, her land, and even her people were taken, leaving behind wounds that have lasted generations. But despite everything, colonization, slavery, sanctions, and foreign control, Africa never gave up. Every field tilled, every revolution fought, every leader who stood up against injustice became part of a long, proud struggle for freedom. The Prime Minister acknowledges that many nations, including his own, have benefited indirectly from this system. And so this apology is not just about Jamaica and Burkina Faso, it's about recognizing the pain of an entire continent that refused to kneel forever. He speaks directly to President Ibrahim Traoré and the people of Burkina Faso, calling them a symbol of courage in a world where speaking truth often comes with punishment. Under Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso has chosen dignity over dependence and sovereignty over submission. Many warned him that his road would be lonely, but instead it became an example for millions. The Prime Minister honors this bravery, comparing it to Jamaica's own history of struggle. Both nations, he says, were made to believe that they were small, yet both have shown that greatness is not measured by wealth or weapons, but by the strength to stand tall. Africa's fight for freedom is not over, but leaders like Traoré prove that the continent's spirit remains unbroken. This part of the speech is deeply emotional because it connects Africa's pain to its pride. The Prime Minister paints a picture of Africa not as a land of despair, but as a land of untapped strength and ancient wisdom. He urges the world to see Africa not through colonial eyes, but through the lens of truth, as a continent that has carried humanity's conscience for centuries. By saying Africa was made poor, he breaks the old narrative and invites the world to admit the truth. Africa's struggle is not just a story of loss, it is a story of endurance, of rediscovery, and of rebirth. And through this acknowledgement, Jamaica joins Africa not as a distant observer, but as a fellow fighter for justice, equality, and the right to shape their own future. True courage, the Prime Minister says, is not in denying your past, it's in facing it. In this historic speech, he does what few leaders ever dare to do. He accepts moral and historical accountability. He admits that Jamaica, like many post-colonial nations, benefited from systems that were designed to exploit Africa. It's a rare moment of honesty in a world where leaders often hide behind excuses or diplomatic words. The Prime Minister declares that silence is also a form of complicity, that standing by while injustice happens makes you part of the problem. His words are a confession, but also a promise that Jamaica will no longer be silent, will no longer turn away from Africa's pain, and will no longer participate in global systems that keep nations unequal. This is not an easy admission. It takes humility, strength, and integrity. He emphasizes that this apology is not a performance or a political gesture. It's not meant for headlines or applause, but for history. The Prime Minister says clearly, "We were wrong, profoundly wrong." Those words echo with power because they come from a place of sincerity. He reminds the world that reconciliation without restoration is empty, and justice without accountability is hollow. By accepting moral responsibility, Jamaica takes a bold step forward, not backward. It chooses the hard road of truth over the easy path of silence. He calls on other nations to look in the mirror and ask themselves the same question: have we benefited from Africa's suffering? And if we have, what are we doing to make it right? Accountability, he explains, is not about shame, it's about growth. The beauty of this message lies in its humanity. The Prime Minister's voice carries both pain and hope, pain for what was done and hope for what can still be made right. He wants this apology to be remembered not just as a speech, but as a turning point in global morality. When one nation admits its part in a collective wound, it encourages others to do the same. He envisions a world where nations are brave enough to say we were wrong and strong enough to change course. Moral accountability, he says, is the foundation of justice, and only when we face our shared history with open eyes can we begin to build a future grounded in respect, equality, and truth. The Prime Minister's words are not just emotional, they come with a clear plan. This is not just about saying sorry and moving on. It's about changing systems, rebuilding relationships, and restoring dignity. The Prime Minister outlines a roadmap for real impact, one that focuses on education, trade, and cultural exchange between Jamaica and Africa. He announces new scholarships for African students to study in Jamaica and Jamaican students to learn in African universities. He speaks of trade partnerships that no longer exploit but empower. We will not just speak of unity, he says, we will build it. This marks the beginning of a new chapter, one where bridges are not built on guilt, but on shared purpose. The speech becomes a blueprint for how words can become action and apologies can become transformation. He goes deeper, explaining that true reparations are not only financial, they are educational, psychological, and cultural. The Prime Minister envisions a network of African and Caribbean nations working together to reclaim their narratives. For too long, others have told our story, he declares. It's time we tell it ourselves. He proposes museums, historical centers, and joint festivals to celebrate shared roots. He wants children in both continents to learn not just about slavery and colonization, but about African brilliance, Caribbean strength, and their common heritage of resistance and creativity. His voice rises with passion when he says, "The impact we seek is not for a day, it is for generations." The room, filled with diplomats and leaders, feels the gravity of his vision. The planned impact is not only symbolic, it's deeply practical. He talks about creating a Pan-African Innovation Fund, supporting young entrepreneurs from both regions. He calls for technology exchange, sustainable agriculture projects, and healthcare cooperation. Our ancestors were connected by chains, he says, but our children will be connected by dreams. That line captures the heart of his plan to replace historical pain with future power. The Prime Minister's message is clear. Jamaica's apology is the seed of a greater movement, a movement that aims to heal wounds, uplift communities, and prove that moral courage can shape real progress. With every word, he turns regret into responsibility, and responsibility into renewal. The impact of Jamaica's apology does not stop at the podium. It spreads like a wave across Africa. From Lagos to Nairobi, from Accra to Addis Ababa, people watch the speech and feel something shift inside them. For decades, Africa has been spoken about but rarely spoken to with such honesty. The Prime Minister's words reach hearts that have carried silent pain for generations. In Ghana, a crowd gathers in the city square to watch the replay on a big screen. Some weep, some smile, but all feel seen. Finally, one old man says, "Someone remembered our ancestors with truth." News channels across the continent discuss how this small island nation dared to do what global powers have not: admit, apologize, and act. It becomes more than a diplomatic event. It becomes a moment of emotional awakening. African leaders begin to respond, not with anger or demands, but with warmth and reflection. The President of Senegal sends a message of appreciation, calling the apology a gesture of rare courage. In South Africa, historians discuss how this acknowledgement could spark a broader movement toward moral reconciliation across continents. The African Union issues a statement welcoming Jamaica's honesty and pledging to deepen Afro-Caribbean cooperation. Universities host debates and youth forums, asking, if Jamaica can do this, why can't others? Social media explodes with hashtags like Africa Remembers and United in Truth. What began as a single voice in Kingston becomes a continental conversation about dignity, healing, and shared destiny. The ripple becomes a current of hope. But the most powerful response comes not from leaders, it comes from the people. African musicians release songs inspired by the apology. Artists paint murals showing Africa and the Caribbean connected by golden roots. Students write essays about identity, pride, and unity. The speech awakens something deep, a sense that history can be rewritten, not by erasing the past, but by facing it together. The Prime Minister's message reminds Africans everywhere that they were never victims, they were survivors, and their story still continues. The ripple across Africa is more than emotional, it's spiritual. It reignites the dream of a united global Africa, one that stands tall, proud, and unbroken. A single apology from Jamaica becomes a spark that lights fires of awakening across an entire continent. When the news of Jamaica's apology reaches the world, it shakes the international community. In Europe and America, television anchors pause mid-broadcast to replay the Prime Minister's words, "We were wrong, and we must make it right." Some are stunned, others applaud. Global newspapers call it a moment of moral clarity in an age of denial. Social media bursts with discussions, some praising Jamaica's courage, others questioning what this means for former colonial powers. But no one can ignore it. The Prime Minister of a small Caribbean island has done what many larger nations have avoided for centuries. His message cuts through politics and pride, reminding the world that justice is not about power, it's about truth. Within days, universities in London, Paris, and Washington organized debates about the future of reparations and moral accountability. The world begins to talk, really talk, about history again. In Africa, the apology becomes a symbol of global respect. In the Caribbean, it sparks pride. And in Europe, it creates unease, a quiet discomfort that leads to reflection. A British historian writes, "This is not just Jamaica's apology, it's a mirror for us all." Germany and Portugal release cautious statements, recognizing the importance of acknowledging historical realities. France remains silent, but its people speak loudly. Tens of thousands sign petitions demanding their government follow Jamaica's lead. In the United States, civil rights groups praise the speech as a call for humanity to heal its oldest wound. Even the United Nations holds a special session discussing ethical diplomacy in post-colonial times. For the first time, a developing nation has led the moral conversation, and the world is listening. But the most beautiful reactions come from ordinary people around the globe. Letters pour into Jamaica from descendants of both enslaved Africans and former colonizers. One reads, "Your courage gives us hope that history can be rewritten in love." A teacher in Kenya writes that her students cried when they watched the speech. A priest in Ireland says he used it in his sermon about forgiveness. The Prime Minister's apology has become more than a political act. It's a global moral movement. It shows that when truth is spoken with humility, it transcends borders. The world begins to see that healing is not about shame, it's about shared humanity. Jamaica's voice, though small in size, has echoed across the planet like a heartbeat, reminding everyone that the first step toward peace is the courage to say, "We were wrong." The Prime Minister's speech is not just about the past, it is a blueprint for what the future can be. He paints a vision where Africa and the Caribbean rise together, shoulder to shoulder, not as distant cousins but as one people with one voice. This future is built on equality, respect, and shared purpose. It is a world where reparations are not only financial but also cultural, educational, and social, where young people can learn their true history, understand their heritage, and feel proud of who they are. In this vision, nations no longer wait for foreign powers to define justice or opportunity, they take control of their own destiny. It is a future where sovereignty is respected, where courage is rewarded, and where dignity is never compromised for convenience or profit. Education, trade, and innovation are at the center of this vision. The Prime Minister speaks of schools where African and Caribbean children study together, exchanging knowledge and culture. He envisions hospitals where healthcare is accessible and respectful, technology hubs where youth develop skills for a global economy, and industries that make nations self-reliant. Every project, every initiative is designed not as a gift but as a partnership, a way to empower rather than control. He emphasizes that the $600 million commitment is just the first step, a foundation on which lasting change can be built. This is a long-term plan that spans generations, ensuring that the promise of equality is woven into the very fabric of society. But the most inspiring part of this vision is the spirit it fosters. The Prime Minister imagines a world where African and Caribbean voices are heard as one on global platforms, where nations support each other in forums that shape international policy, and where cooperation replaces competition. This vision extends beyond borders. It calls for solidarity across the global South, a movement of nations committed to justice, growth, and self-determination. He reminds the audience that this future will not be easy. It will require courage, patience, and humility. Yet by taking this first bold step, Jamaica and Burkina Faso show the world that change is possible. This vision is more than a plan, it is a promise that history's lessons can shape a brighter, united and empowered tomorrow. The true legacy of this historic apology lies not in the speech itself, but in the actions and courage it inspires. The Prime Minister of Jamaica understands that words alone cannot change history. They must be backed by commitment and integrity. By acknowledging past wrongs and pledging $600 million to Burkina Faso, he sets a standard for leaders everywhere. This legacy is about showing that small nations can lead with moral courage, that honesty and accountability can transcend borders, and that history can be faced with dignity rather than ignored. It is a reminder to future generations that justice is not given, it is demanded, acted upon and protected. This apology will be remembered not for its monetary figure, but for the bravery to confront centuries of injustice with clarity, humility and heart. Beyond financial restitution, this legacy is cultural and emotional. It inspires people to believe that their voices matter, that their stories can be acknowledged, and that the wounds of the past can be healed through solidarity and understanding. By connecting Burkina Faso and Jamaica through education, trade and shared cultural projects, the Prime Minister ensures that this apology leaves a lasting impact on everyday life. Young people in both nations will grow up seeing history confronted with honesty and transformed into opportunity. This is a legacy of empowerment, one that teaches future leaders that courage, empathy, and moral clarity are far more valuable than temporary political gain. It is the kind of legacy that shapes nations, societies, and global relationships for decades to come. Finally, this moment becomes a symbol for the entire global South. It reminds the world that reconciliation is possible, that historical injustices can be addressed, and that unity can rise from shared struggle. The Prime Minister's apology ensures that Jamaica's children and Africa's children inherit a story not only of pain, but also of resilience, hope, and partnership. The legacy is a bridge, one built from truth, respect, and enduring friendship that future generations can walk across with pride. It challenges nations everywhere to take responsibility for the past, to act with courage in the present, and to leave behind a future defined by justice rather than silence. In this way, the apology becomes more than a speech. It becomes a living legacy, echoing through history as a testament to human dignity, moral courage, and the power of reconciliation.